Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this International Business and You webinar session. My name is Dennis Perrin. I'm on the World Trade Center's Institute Advisory Board, and I'm happy to say that we've been a proud supporter of this event since 2013, its inception. I will be a moderator today and help you with Q&A at the end of the session. It's my pleasure to introduce Javion Blake, founder of Just Chill International. Javion describes himself as an adamant dreamer and even more joyful doer. A Jamaican native, Javion relocated to the United States to pursue education in mechanical, industrial, and management engineering. In 2019, Javion launched his vision of starting an international business, and he's here today to tell you all about it. Javion?
Thank you very much, Dennis. I appreciate the introduction. And I look forward to sharing what I have started from a vision in 2019, and now moving into the market, or I've been moving to the market. So, the title of my presentation here today is titled Breadfruit, a Story of International Business. As Dennis had mentioned, my name is Javion Blake. The brand out in the open market is referred to as Just Chill, and I'm the founder of Just Chill. And I'm sure the big question here in everyone's mind right now is, what is breadfruit? And just so we can get those questions out of the way, breadfruit is a tropically grown fruit, what is sometimes considered a tropical potato. It's grown in the regions of the world where people typically go for vacation, all the way from Hawaii over to Jamaica to West Africa, or even interiors of Africa in some places, to Tahiti, all the way over to the Philippines and far beyond. Now, why is this story relevant to you? I believe this story is relevant to you because many of you are either in the space or about to go into the space where you're going to be bringing value. You're going to be seeking to bring value to the market, and sometimes value finds itself you'll find value in places where you least expect it. And sometimes, in this case, like for example, being food waste or lack of utilization or lack of innovation in the food product. The next thing you're probably wondering is, like, when do I see this on the shelf? We do have a few local shelves and across the nation, really, and we're looking to expand that. So as soon as possible would be our hope. And who am I? I am just a kid from Jamaica who had a dream and followed that dream all the way through engineering, and now I'm traversing the world of entrepreneurship and looking forward to sharing that with you and the rest of the world. And just excited about bringing value to the consumers, the customers, and all the partners that I work with in building this dream into a reality. Where is breadfruit found naturally? As kind of mentioned, it's all the way in the tropical natural belt. It doesn't grow anywhere north of Florida, so it's usually just within the tropical regions of the world. And how is the first time that you're hearing about this, breadfruit in general? Really, it's because it's just never really been commercialized until now. We're one of the first company in the United States that's doing a commercial breadfruit byproduct. And so, we're just the first, but you're going to be seeing much more of it. Now, with that out of the way, I want to kind of dig a little bit further into the business of international trade, and what some of the basics that I've come to understand about that space after going through it, or while going through it. So first thing first is we have traditionally have an experience of the world from a germ, gun, and steel concept of how the world operates, which is a more domination association with the wider world, where one society develops certain solutions to problems and then export those solutions in a one-size-fits-all to different societies around the world. I think we're looking at a future that's going to be significantly different in that I think shared experiences is probably going to be a bigger part of the future moving forward. And that's why you see companies like Airbnb focusing so extensively on the idea of experiences, because everyone who grew up with shoes want to go somewhere else and figure out what is it like walking barefoot, doing something else. And that even that can itself become a service that can be brought to the market. In terms of what I think it takes to get into the world of international trade, I think guts comes to mind as one of the first things. But at the same time, that guts come to mind in traversing these unknown territories and developing these different relationships that you need to get things done on the ground. At the same time, we have to consider empathy, because the empathy comes in where you are now understanding that when you're dealing with international trade, you're dealing with cross-culture, cross-borders, and people look at things different ways. And you have to find a way to empathize and understanding how the people that you're dealing with, your consumers, your customers, your suppliers, your vendors, whatever it is, you have to understand to a level of where they're coming from, because at the end of the day, they are the resources that are going to bring you the value you need to get to market. And so when you think of guts and empathy, you probably think of two different things, but really and truly, that's where I believe creativity comes into play. You really have to come up with creative solution. And as an entrepreneur, I think that's what really you do on a daily basis, is creatively solve problems in different ways that have just never been done before, or figuring out ways that can leverage systems that would solve your problems that have been created already. And I think something that's very important in the entrepreneurial space is understanding that it's best to acknowledge the trees as opposed to just searching for the furnitures in the forest. And I know that sounds interesting in certain ways, but I'm going to kind of like give some ideas of what I mean by that. I think typically we'll go into something searching for the right, expecting that there's a right solution. And so we approach the space and look specifically for the solution we seek. But in terms of doing that, a lot of times we miss some of the opportunities for things we can use to arrive at that solution. And so I am suggesting that when you're looking for a solution, look at what's there, acknowledge it, and then look at how what is there can be used to get you to the end result you seek. And following up on this, I would say the power of first principle thinking over analogy thinking can be very, very effective in the world of entrepreneurship, innovation, and just creativity in general. First principle generally refers to the concept of like, what are the natural laws governing certain practices, governing certain situations, governing certain laws, or governing certain arrangements. And so what that means is you go to the baseline level and you see what are the governing factors, and then you try to understand how you can manipulate these variables in these underlying laws to actually get you the end result you seek. In comparison, you have analogy thinking. Analogy thinking is looking at something and say, oh, it's been done this way before, therefore we can approach doing it this way again. And so you're going off based on what has been done, as opposed to coming up with a solution just based on the underlying principles that govern those situations or the outcomes. And international trading generally, when you're starting something, you typically have to consider the capacity. And when you go into a lot of economies that do not have a lot of infrastructures in place to do as much of the thing like that might be here in the US, you have to consider how are you going to build these capacities to be able to produce the end result. And so always go into any kind of decision you make in international trade or trade in general about capacity building and understanding that it's going to take some effort to get that up and moving, and for your vendors to form your habits and form relationships and all that. Now, that being said, I kind of just want to give you a touch on a little bit of my background. Again, kind of as Dennis had mentioned, I grew up in Jamaica. I lived in Jamaica. I visited the US somewhat as a teenager, but I moved to the US full-time to go to school here back in 2009, where I started studying mechanical engineering. I'd actually started studying in Kingston, Jamaica. I grew up myself in the western part of Ireland, where in Montego Bay, just outside Montego Bay, so like overlooking the countryside. And so I'm just one of those regular, Jamaican kid who grew up next to the beach, eating fresh fruits, and breadfruit was just one of those things that we consume on a regular basis, especially during the summer times. We just roasted on an open fire. And so I grew up with those memories, with me and my brother. I have three more siblings, two older sisters and one younger sister. My immigrant experience, moving to the US was kind of similar to my Jamaican experience, where I would say I think I had a relatively good experience growing up in Jamaica and also transitioning to the US. I think the experience was rather also very, I was very welcomed. And I had moved from Jamaica to Montana. And so there were just a lot of differences that existed throughout my time making that transition. But when people ask, I would always say, I traded the sand for the snow. And moving to Montana was the first place where I really saw snow. And so it was an experience. Professionally, at least when I was in school, I studied mechanical engineering with an aerospace minor. And then I completed my grad school in Montana State as well, in Bozeman, in industrial management engineering. And then I started doing product design for a company out here in Denver in the summer as well. I was in grad school, and then they asked me to come out full time when I graduated. And after graduation, I moved out to Denver, and that's kind of where my professional journey started post school. Now, with that being covered, I kind of want to just like touch on and walk through the general journey of what I feel like of entrepreneurship. And I use the term journey on purpose because I really want that there to be an understanding that entrepreneurship is not really about the destination as much as it's about the journey. You establish your destination so you kind of have a clear path on where you're trying to go, but you have to find value. You have to find something in the journey that keeps you going, because there comes time when it's literally going to be the logical same thing to do is to stop, but you're still going to have to search out the journey to find something to make that next step, because you making that next step is what brings the dream to reality. And in terms of entrepreneurship, I hear a lot of people say, for example, like they want to start a business because they don't want to work for anyone. And I tend to differ. I do not think that's the way to think about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is literally about serving a community, serving a group of clients, customers, consumers. So you're not there to just bring the thing that you want. You're there to bring the thing that your audience or your community wants from you. The difference is you have some flexibility in understanding how to bring that value to your community. And when using the term value, there are two things that need to be differentiated when we think of value. So there's an intrinsic value and there's a perceived value. And what I mean by that is intrinsic means it has technical functionality in a sense. So for example, let's look at the example of a breadfruit. A breadfruit is really a food. So what does it do? It provides nutrients. It provides you with the caloric intake you need to be able to move around and get things done. However, in today's world of abundance, where we have such significant amount of things on the market where people can eat food, the defining factor is not going to be like, oh, breadfruit and new food is available. Now, what are the perceived value that can align with a lot of the market trends associated with the natural food space? And those perceived value comes from, in our case, breadfruit is naturally gluten-free. Breadfruit is superfood. Breadfruit is grain-free. Breadfruit is paleo. Breadfruit, I can keep going, but you can see these values that align with a community, a community that understands like they want healthier options, but they also want things to taste good. And breadfruit offers that value. And so defining your perceived value versus your intrinsic value and really focusing on your perceived value when you're marketing to your community is very essential. Because at the end of the day, if you're just focused on the intrinsic value, you're more than likely going to become a commodity in the market space. And so I just want to kind of throw some of these things that I've learned along the way that hopefully can help you guys move forward in your journey in the world of international business, in the world of professional development, young professional development, whatever it is. And I'm calling them golden nuggets. One of the thing is, if you're interested in international business, one of the first things you need to understand is business is really a platform that allows people to connect with people and transact with people. So in other words, you're not doing business to business. You're doing business with people to people relationships. And one of the first things that you have to understand is if you're trying to get into the global landscape, global space, you want to connect with those communities in those global landscape, because those might be the pivoting point that allows you to get into that wider global community. Some of the areas, for example, like myself, I am a part of the World Trade Center. I'm a part of World Denver. And there are several other organizations around Denver, around Colorado, that allows you to plug into that young professional, globally minded individuals. And I think that's an area that should be significantly considered if you're serious about getting into this space. And just understand the power of networks. As I mentioned, you never know. You meet someone today, that person can connect you to the person that you need to do business with, a year from now or 2 weeks from now. And a personal recommendation is always a lot more powerful than almost any online marketing platform. Another thing to follow up on that kind of theories is understand that you either define your circle or your circle defines you. And so if you're trying to get into a global space, if you're trying to get into whatever space that you're trying to get into, understand that that space has certain players, and those players are probably best equipped to help you to grow into the person that you seek to become. And there are people out there who are willing and happy to give you advice on how to move forward. One of the things for most people is overcoming limiting beliefs. What I mean by limiting beliefs is you act based on how you believe things are. So if I believe like no one will eat breadfruit, like I wouldn't put in the work it takes to bring breadfruit to market and to do all those kind of things. So because I believe that breadfruit has value, I put in the action daily to execute on that belief and knowing that it's going to be a market success. And you have to believe that each day when you step forward. Now, with the idea of overcoming limiting belief, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, it's what we're great at. We love big picture visions. We love like thinking about how we're gonna, fix the world, change it, roll it off its axis, all of that. But at the same time, we have to understand that as a creator, we have to do the detailed execution necessary to bring across the big picture vision that we have. And so it's a balancing act between figuring out how to blend the big picture vision, but focusing on the detailed execution, because the flawless execution is what creates excellence. And that's what you get. That's what builds up that picture. It's like a pixel. It's like a pixel going into a photo. The photo is beautiful, but without the pixel, it doesn't actually make any sense. Another few things that I hear a lot of the times is people saying stuff like, "Oh, it's always been discovered. It's already been discovered." I literally was at an event 2 weeks ago, and someone mentioned that to me, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like I come up with probably like a different idea every 2 weeks. I don't follow them all, obviously, because you need focus. In entrepreneurship, you need to focus and you need to remain focused. But at least I can see many things that can be done differently, can be done better, and can really bring value to the market space. And I always think about it that way. There's always a different way of doing things. And if you figure it that way, and there are enough people out there who want that solution, you have something to bring to the market. And now you just have to get behind putting the effort necessary to bring it to market. Another thing is people tend to consider innovation as like this grandiose thing where you discover this new molecule that has never been discovered, or something massive where you figure out how to make this material that's like stronger than steel and lighter than feather. And those are great, those are all awesome inventions. But at the same time, we have to think about invention as a lot simpler perspective, from a simpler perspective. For example, with Rockefeller, when Rockefeller was being pretty much held at ransom by the major train companies, he decided, you know what, I'm not going to put my oil on the train cars anymore. I'm going to use pipes. And today we look at pipes as like, oh, of course you're putting, oil or gas through pipes. But several years ago, that was innovation. That was him deciding, I'm not using train car for my oil. I am using pipelines instead. And so the innovation can be a lot of times very simple. And understanding that will help you to think more broadly when it comes to bringing something innovative and creative to the market segment. Understand the role that culture plays. As culture move across differently in different areas, there are different things that can be brought to different cultures at different times that can be an innovation. Similarly with geography, something that might work here in the US could, that's been working for 10 years in the US can be brought to India, can be brought to Jamaica, can be brought to, anywhere else, and could be an innovation for that local market. And also understand, ease is always in demand. Ease is always in demand. If you can think of something that you can feasibly produce and you can make it easier for the consumer to acquire, to get what they want with your product, you're almost sure you're going to be in demand. And just to follow up on some lessons I learned from a dinner I had. A friend of mine, she recently graduated from Harvard Business School, and we sat down for dinner right after graduation. And so I would just throw some random question out. It's like, what are 3 things that you think you've learned that was surprising? And one of them were, it's relationship, not technical competency. Speak up. And another one was, speak up and share your ideas. Let your voice be heard. And tell stories. Don't just cite facts. And I think you see a compelling trend between all 3 of these, all 3 of these major tenets that were gathered through our experience at Harvard, because they all speak about self-confidence. You have to have a level of self-confidence to take on this journey. If you're doing anything new and unique, you're gonna have everybody else telling you you're wrong. And most of the time, there's gonna have some logical reason to tell you you're wrong. And when you tell everybody else that that no, they are wrong and you're right, that takes a level of confidence that you have to really believe in your execution, that you're gonna prove them right. You're gonna prove yourself right and prove them wrong. And so self-confidence is very important, and always considered in everything you do, because it's never really about, again, the technical competency as much as it's about the person. The technical competence is definitely important, do not get me wrong, but you also want to consider a high level of confidence. Another thing, when it comes to setting up a business, it can be just this ambiguous like venture that you go into. And something to consider, I think it's always good to have a structure when you're thinking about things, when you're elaborating different business ideas. I find the structure of sense to be relatively effective. I got these from several books from MJ DeMarco, who talks about the concept of sense. And I think it just helps you to evaluate the different business opportunities that might come your way and figure out whether it makes sense for you or not to move forward. And the C in sense stands for control. And that control looks at how well do you control the different variables that involve in your value chain. Understanding how much control you have over that is very important, because you don't want someone else to have too much control over that, because they can just easily shut off the pipe at any time. Secondary to that, entry barrier. There needs to be some barrier of entry involved in the market space that you're looking to operate in. Because if there's no entry barrier, as soon as you establish yourself in that space, someone else is going to come in. But if there's an entry barrier that's significant enough, that entry barrier becomes your competitive advantage, because others are going to have a harder time overcoming that entry barrier. Obviously, if you're bringing any product to market, any service to market, understand that there needs to be some level of needs. Again, the needs can be something that's either intrinsic or perceived, and that's the value you bring to your consumer or your customer. So understand which one you're actually solving for, whether it's intrinsic need or a perceived need. And typically, an intrinsic need means you're probably getting in a commodity space. So consider that as well. And time independence. It's like if you're building a venture, you probably want that venture to be time independent. So you want to be in a space where you don't have to be putting extra time each time you need to grow. You want to be in a space where you can change your strategy and the time you put in is still the same, but you're able to get significant more return on the efforts you input. And lastly, scale, understanding that there needs to be a level of scalability to whatever project you do, and you're able to reach a wider audience. With the internet, that has become significantly more likely, but at the same time, consider that you're not going to be able to send a massage through an email, right? Like you're going to be able to do those things at a touch point, but at the same time, you can scale through franchise or through different systems in which allows you to serve many different customers across a wider geographic area. And then when it comes to marketing, it's really people think about marketing as a very complex thing. I think marketing should be very simple. I think you first want to tell your niche market what you got. So you want to define what your niche is and understand how to communicate clearly with your niche. And then you also and when I say niche, I'm referring to like your community, the people who would benefit from your service or your products. And then you also want to tell them where to go get it. You know, you want to communicate that message very clearly, whether it's going to go online, go buy it, show up to here at this event, or whatever it is, communicate that. And then explain to them in their language. Again, entrepreneurship is understanding the consumer and communicating directly in their languages. So communicate with them in their languages what benefits your product has for them. And then what they can do to help. Most people in the world today want to be a part of a community. As much as online is out there, people still want to be a part of a community. And they want to help to bring the next great idea to life. So explain to people how they can help you. And a lot of times they will definitely be willing to put some input. And then tell them when they can start helping. You want to communicate that clearly. You want to be as simple and you want to be as precise as much as possible, because trust me, a lot of people will try to help you to make that vision if you can inspire them enough to do so. And then, yeah, call to action. Always have a call to action in your marketing material, whether that's a subscription, whether that's like an email, whether that's like a purchase, something, but have some kind of call to action so it's clearly communicated. Now, in terms of the personal side, I think it's very important to note entrepreneurship requires patience. And no, I am not sitting on a throne telling you I've figured this all out, because I am still working on this. But the patience, you definitely need to make the next step forward, because you're going to take action and not get the immediate result you need at that point in time. So you have to have the patience enough to know, you know what, let me figure out a different way. Remain clear mind, remain focused, try to like meditate on what you're trying to get done and take the next step. And, you know, be forgiving with yourself as well, but also stick to your mission and remain focused. Be process thinking, like think about the process. Don't just think about the event of the final outcome. Think about how can you find value? How can you find some kind of feeling of like accomplishment throughout the wider process, because you need that. You need to feel along the way, because sometimes it's going to make you feel like you want to stop, but you have to find something that says, I'm going to take the next step. And then lastly, on patience, is understand that you're in the problem solving business. Entrepreneurship is in the service to others problem solving business. And you just, instead of looking at something as like, this is the end of it and this is the worst thing ever, look at it as, how can I solve this problem? And I promise that will help you to move forward in whichever endeavor you take on.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And then really and truly, like the future is now. You know, the future everyone talked about several years ago is right now. And let's step in it together. And for us to really get into that connective future and really be able to move forward into that space, I think there are a few things that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for, whether it's going to be employment, whether it's going to be careers, or whatever it is. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for communication, because I think a lot of time we miss the concept of communication. Communication is not me just speaking to you. Communication is communicating an idea to you that gets translated in the best way possible that you intended. And so there are going to be platforms that are going to be needed to help to communicate a lot of these different cultural aspects, and you know, whether it's simple or complex, like all of those things need to be considered. So there are going to be lots of apps to translate languages, but there's still going to be a lot of need for communicating those languages in local colloquial terms and associations. Culture is always a big thing. International trade is a big part on culture. You always want to figure out a way how you can be most respectful to others' culture, and you know, vice versa. Understand that not because you're surrounded by everyone that's very similar, when you go on the international landscape, that's not the same thing. And so you have to develop a level of empathy and understand how to appreciate different cultural perspectives, and understand, again, perspective is very important. Perspective is how you see the world. someone else has different perspectives. Bridging the two is how you get things done. And how we get things done, again, it could either be, traditionally it was more of a competitive landscape. I think now we're moving into a world of collaboration. It's going to be a lot of more collaborative landscapes. So you're going to solve problems with people from totally different parts of the world. And so understanding how to do that is going to be very important. Like you're actually going to come up with a solution together. Now that's different from coordination, where the solution is going to be already defined and you're coordinating the different team members to arrive at a particular end result. But I think these are all four major areas that is going to take a lot of professional developments over the years as the world becomes more and more connected. As Facebook launches internet and every remote part of the world becomes on the internet, like its connectivity is going to be a big thing. And I think the world will need professionals in who are best equipped to translate these messages and get things done on the ground. With that said, that was mostly that was all the points I wanted to communicate mostly. And I just want to finish with one thing and say, you're never as good as they say you are when you win, and you're never as bad as they say you are when you lose. And so in short, remain humble, stay hungry. Because when you really think about it, it's all mathematics and probabilities anyway. So go out there and take your shot. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Javion. That was very insightful coming from a person who's been there and done that. I'm sure the students in the audience and those attending can take away some great feedback from your session. We do have several questions, and I'll start with first is, what has been your biggest challenge with not only having a new healthy organic product, but also a product that is not as widely known in large commercial markets as other fruits?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge, interestingly, has been the production side of the equation. It's initially going into it, I would think, oh, it's going to be the demand. You have to develop that demand. You have to communicate that value. And that's true. There's definitely a piece of that. But the largest part has been, how do we get enough of this thing that people start loving to the people that need it? And so that has been the production side, and being able to build a team around that, both on the ground and both more here facing consumers, has been a big part of it. And also trying to bring investors on board to understand the value of this thing, because it's just so new and different.
Thank you. And next question. How has COVID impacted your breadfruit business?
In the beginning, it had a significant impact. There was that time period where, kind of like convinced the co-manufacturer, like in 2020 March, literally like 2 weeks before the lockdown, that okay, we're gonna try this thing. And so we had this co-manufacturer lined up, and right when the lockdown happened, we were just like not able to go into that facility. And so that relationship was kind of fizzled over time. And so I wasn't able to use that co-manufacturer here locally in Denver. And so we had to come up with different strategies on how to produce the product. And also I wasn't able to travel to Jamaica for a while. So we kind of like lost a little bit of like steam in terms of developing the relationships on the ground for the supply. And a lot of things I had to just be doing a lot more remotely, and figuring out how people should, package to send off, because again, it's so new. So there were several areas that were impacted by the COVID lockdown, but I think we were able to definitely bolster ourselves and move forward. And I think we're looking at a great future.
Thank you. Next question. How did you perfect your supply chain? What steps did you take?
First thing I'm going to say, the supply chain has not been perfected yet. But one of the things that we have been working on doing to increase the robustness of our supply chain has been to diversify our suppliers, and being able to ensure that, wherever there's a shock in the market, we can still absorb it and still have adequate products to get to the market space. And so that's been one of our big things, is and really working to develop very long-term relationships with our suppliers in these different regions. And, we're talking about at least 3 different cultures that we have to deal with on a daily, at least 4 different cultures to deal with on a daily basis. So that cultural communication aspect is very, very important. yeah, so we're still working to perfect our supply chain, but relationship building has been a major aspect of that, diversification of our supply sources, and also just, motivating the team on the ground to be a part of this vision.
Perfect. Next question is, what other things are you working on doing with Breadfruit? I saw that you have breadfruit chips and a breadfruit pancake mix. What are your next products?
So we have the breadfruit chips out. We have a few new variations, a few new flavors of breadfruit chips that are going to be coming out in a few weeks or so. Should be in Q4 of 2021. And then we also have a new product line of a breadfruit mix coming out. Should be before the end of the year. So for the Christmas period, we're hoping to have a few of our new products on a few lists, because Christmas seems to be a great time for people trying to send new and exciting things to their family members. So yeah.
What is the sentiment of your growers and suppliers in Jamaica to this expansion, this international trade?
Oh, it's very exciting. Like, they're very excited. I think a large portion of people that I worked with, they have envisioned breadfruit, being like, oh, we're gonna send breadfruit to the diaspora, or we're gonna send breadfruit to people locally, or someone, visitors coming down to Jamaica is gonna see some breadfruit in the hotel. But they've become so enlightened, I would say, in a sense, when they're seeing like, oh my God, like, this breadfruit is like gluten-free. Like, they didn't realize that breadfruit was gluten-free or grain-free. Like, never was like grain-free is a thing. And so now all of a sudden there's a lot more pride associated with like bringing this product to market, because they can see on a larger like mainstream market how this product can have a value and impact a lot more people from a wider demographic.
Perfect. What other countries are you using for suppliers? Do you have any in Africa?
We've had some discussions with African countries. For right now, we have never done any shipment out of the continent. That's not because we have adequate supply. There is adequate supply for sure. Like, I know Liberia, for one, has adequate supply. I know a lot of the West African countries have significant amount of supply. But we've just been focused largely on the Caribbean and Latin America at the moment. But we know that if we need for expansion, we have opportunities to go into, the far Southeast Asia market. We have opportunities to go into, the Pacific markets, and we have a visibility in most of those segments, again, because we're kind of like driving that mission forward to make this product a lot more commercially available to the wider mainstream markets.
And lastly, how has the Jamaican government either supported or hindered you with exporting products from Jamaica?
I would say I wouldn't say they have hindered. I think they have done. Again, it's a new product, and not everyone catches on to innovation as fast. But I've been able to find some very, very passionate people in helping to move this project forward. Actually, today, if I wasn't on here, I would actually be meeting with the Minister of Agriculture at the consulate in New York, because I was invited out there to sit down and have breakfast with him to talk about what are some opportunities to be able to move this industry forward. And so I think they've been largely supportive. Like, for example, JAMPRO, which is Jamaican Promotion, they have been largely supportive. I know the Jamaican consulate, as they've offered insight and say, hey, this is something that we can do. So they've been largely supportive in trying to develop this industry. But I just think it's so new that not many really know how to come in and offer help as yet, but they do want to see this industry really move forward and really grow. And they're just starting to see the value of that. Even last night I had a vendor meeting, and they were just like, oh my God, like, we never really thought about it like from this level. And your packaging obviously communicates a different story from what we were thinking that could potentially be on the market. And so, yeah, we don't have much endurance, to be honest, at least in that landscape.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much for your session. That was very insightful, and I know it was very beneficial to many of the attendees. My takeaway, my nugget from this presentation was that your comment that business is really a platform to connect people. And I think that's a message that resonates with many businesses. For the you attendees, please check out the chat for this session's giveaway and for the others as well. That's it for now. We'll give you a 5-minute break and be with you again shortly.
Thank you very much, everyone.